Back at the Morgan home, Shadow lay on the porch, calm and watchful, while Eli sketched in his spiral notebook, creating a comic titled Captain Shadow and the Four-Legged League. Shadow's ears twitched at the distant chorus of frogs. Not an alarm, just listening. He was no longer just a rescue. He had become a reason others made it home. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or lightning. Sometimes they come on four legs, with tired eyes and a heart that refuses to give up. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was a message, a quiet reminder that love can survive the darkest nights, and that even when hope seems lost, grace can appear in the most unexpected forms. In a world where too many children are forgotten, Shadow reminded everyone that courage can bark, loyalty can bleed, and hope can walk beside you, even in the form of a scarred, old shepherd. If you believe in second chances, in redemption, or simply in the goodness that still flickers quietly in the world, say a prayer tonight for all the shadows still running through the storm for someone they love. And if this story touched your heart, help us keep these stories alive. Share this video with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you believe in miracles, type Amen in the comments. Subscribe for more true stories of love, loyalty, and the unseen hands of grace. May God bless you and everyone you hold dear. Rachel watched from the edge of the park, brushing her fingers along Eli's shoulder. She glanced at Shadow, noting the way he rested, tail sweeping the grass, eyes ever watchful despite the warmth of the afternoon. "He's more than a dog," she said softly to herself. "He's hope." Tessa remained nearby, scanning the horizon, eyes sharp but heart lighter. The case files, the meetings, the nights spent chasing leads. They were all part of the life she had chosen. But here, watching the quiet hero beside the boy who had been lost and found, she felt a rare peace. Shadow lifted his head slightly, sniffing the breeze, ears twitching, before settling back down. The children played in the distance, laughter bright against the soft hum of the town. Eli whispered a story to his dog, words gentle, barely audible, but filled with gratitude and trust. Shadow rested his chin on his paws, letting the moment wash over him. In that sun-drenched park, with petals falling lightly from the dogwoods and a soft wind weaving through the branches, Cedar Hollow finally felt whole again. And at the center of it all, a German shepherd with a scarred ear, tired but unbowed, remained the quiet, steadfast heart of a community that had learned, in the fiercest of ways, the true meaning of courage, loyalty, and love. "Can Shadow come to school with us?" Nina asked, eyes wide. Tessa smiled softly. "You'll have to ask his boss," she replied. Nina giggled and ran off to find Eli. Rachel followed, laughing. "You ready for the next case?" Rachel asked. "I don't think I ever won't be," Tessa said, her voice steady. "But it's easier now, knowing we already won one." As dusk settled over Cedar Hollow, golden light spilled through the trees like honey. Families laughed in the distance, and the air carried the scent of lilacs and freshly cut grass. Shadow, wrapped gently in gauze, remained close, his vigil unbroken. And for the first time in hours, Tessa allowed herself to exhale fully, feeling the weight of fear and adrenaline give way to something else. Hope. Eli leaned closer, whispering again, "Your magic, Shadow." The dog's ears twitched in acknowledgement, a soft rumble of agreement. Around them, the whispers of the town grew louder, carried out into the misted streets. A story of courage, loyalty, and unyielding instinct, a tale that would be told and retold. And in that gym, under fluorescent light and the gentle hum of recovery, one hero, furred, golden-eyed, steadfast, rested, knowing he had kept his promise, that he had led them all home. Nina hesitated a moment, then reached out a small hand toward Tessa. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing him to us." Tessa knelt slightly, letting the girl's hand rest in hers. "No," she said gently, "thank Shadow. He's the one who carried all of you through the storm." Nina nodded, a shy but genuine smile tugging at her lips, and ran back to join the other children. Eli leaned against Shadow, tracing the scarred ear with a fingertip. "He saved us." he murmured, voice soft, almost reverent. Shadow's amber eyes met his, patient, steady, and almost knowing. There was a quiet pride there, but not arrogance. Just the deep, unshakable calm of one who had done what had to be done. Around them, the town moved forward. Streets glistened under new sunlight, laughter-filled yards where silence had lingered too long, and families went about their days with a sense of safety slowly knitting itself back into the fabric of Cedar Hollow. But for those who had felt the storm, both literal and metaphorical, it was the moments in the quiet that mattered most. The small hands brushing fur, the soft nudges, the presence that spoke louder than words. The 4 drip beside him marked his wounds, but even bandaged and weary, there was a palpable strength in the way he rested, coiled like a spring ready to surge if needed. Eli lingered close, eyes wide, still processing the day's horrors and miracles. He pressed a small hand gently on Shadow's fur, his fingers tracing the coarse hair as if grounding himself in the reality of the moment. The card he had drawn, taped tenderly near the dog's paw, seemed to shimmer in the fluorescent light, a simple emblem of trust, courage, and gratitude. Tessa stood back for a moment, watching the quiet interactions, the soft murmurs of comfort, the children tentatively exploring their freedom, the adults finally exhaling. Each piece of the day's ordeal seemed to settle into place, the chaos folding into a fragile order. And yet, she couldn't shake the memory of the danger, the calculated precision of Greaves, the shadows that had stretched across the county for years. Across the room, Shadow stirred slightly, lifting his head and letting out a low, contented sigh. The gold in his eyes flickered with something beyond fatigue, a recognition, an affirmation that the world had, for a brief moment, tilted back toward justice. Tessa knelt beside him again, brushing her hand along his side. "You were brilliant today," she whispered. "All of you safe because of you." The children, once huddled and terrified, began to smile shyly, their laughter small and cautious, but growing. Volunteers snapped photos for records and for families, but none captured what Tessa and everyone present already knew. A dog had become the difference between life and death. A silent, unwavering hero who had refused to fail. As the storm subsided outside, the community slowly gathered around the children, wrapping them in warmth, blankets, and reassurance. Tessa glanced up at the ventilation grate, imagining the hours, days, perhaps weeks these kids had spent trapped in this forgotten corner. The warehouse, a skeleton of rusted metal and rot, had concealed horrors no one in Cedar Hollow could have imagined. The triangle inside a circle, the ritualistic patterns, the puzzle pieces were finally clicking together. Behind her, Raoul's radio crackled. Rhea's voice came through, clipped, professional. Primary team securing other areas. Confirmed for suspects detained. Additional sweep in progress. Tessa exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain for the first time since the chase began. Shadow nudged her hand, pressing against her palm as if saying, "We did it. They're safe." She looked down at the children. Tiny hands reached out for her, trembling against her jacket. "You're safe now," she whispered again, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still thrumming in her chest. Shadow lay at her feet, vigilant yet calm, the guardian who had led them through darkness, storm, and danger. The rain continued to hammer against the warehouse roof, but inside, a fragile bubble of relief and quiet had formed. The children, though frightened, were free. And for Tessa, for Shadow, for Raoul, and for everyone who had believed in following instincts over procedure, the moment was a reminder of why they fought, why they endured. The smallest lives sometimes demanded the fiercest courage. Outside, the mist clung to the pines, the storm roaring on. But inside that hidden chamber, hope had returned, carried on the paws of a dog who refused to fail. The gymnasium hummed with quiet awe, a mixture of relief and reverence that hung in the air like a fragile thread. Volunteers moved carefully, giving space to the rescued children, but everyone's eyes kept drifting back to the German shepherd lying in the corner. Shadow's chest rose and fell slowly, each breath deliberate, measured. The neon vacancy sign flickered above the motel lot, rain spattering cold against the asphalt. Room 8. Inside, Tom Redmond slumped in the corner, pills scattered, tipped whiskey bottle glinting. A note scrawled hastily, "They know I talked. I can't run anymore." Shadow didn't react to the body. He moved, tense, sniffing the air, leading Tessa to the bathroom. Tiles cracked, light flickering. At the baseboards, his hackles rose, a sharp bark splitting the silence. Tessa knelt, brushing a towel aside, revealing faint streaks, drag marks across the linoleum, away from the body. "This wasn't suicide," she said, voice tight. "Someone staged it." There was a struggle. Raoul nodded, grim. "Lab will confirm." If he was silenced, he was about to tell us something important. Tessa pulled a small vial from her pocket, the scent from Eli's backpack, the strange cologne. She uncapped it near Shadow. His ears flicked sharply, nose quivering. Then, without hesitation, he bolted down the hallway, low growl rumbling through him. "Shadow, wait," Tessa called, heart pounding. But the dog was already gone, nose to the ground, determined, pulling her into the next piece of the puzzle she couldn't yet see. Tessa's heart pounded as she peered into the cramped space. Rain dripped from the ceiling above, forming tiny rivulets along the walls of the cubby. Inside, huddled and trembling, were 3 children, Mia Patterson among them. Faces streaked with dirt, eyes wide with fear and relief. Shadow pressed close, tail wagging cautiously, letting out soft, reassuring whines. Raoul crouched beside her, flashlight scanning the cramped chamber. "Everyone okay?" he asked, voice low, urgent. Tiny nods answered him. The children clung together, whispering names and murmuring prayers, too exhausted to speak loudly. Shadow's amber eyes flicked between them and Tessa, a silent confirmation. They were safe, for now. Back at the hospital, the amber light from the bedside lamp softened the room as dusk swallowed Cedar Hollow outside. Shadows stretched long across the floor, the town quiet, holding its breath. Eli stirred beneath the sheets, fingers twitching, eyes fluttering open for the first time since the rescue. Tessa leaned close, gentle, steady. "Hey, Eli, you're safe now." The boy blinked, confusion in his gaze, until he found the familiar curve of Shadow lying at the foot of the bed. "Doggy," he murmured, voice dry, cracked. Tessa poured water, guiding it to his lips. "His name's Shadow. He found you. Led us to you." Eli nodded faintly, then shut his eyes, gathering courage. When he spoke again, it was slow, deliberate. "They had a truck. Big, black, no license plate." He hesitated. "Faces? Names?" Tessa prompted gently. "2 men," he whispered. "One wore gloves. The other smelled strong, like burnt oranges and metal." Tessa stiffened. That scent was precise, unforgettable. "The man with the gloves," Eli continued. "He had a tattoo, a triangle inside a circle." Shadow nudged the boy's fingers, tail brushing lightly. Eli let it rest there, comforted, a weak smile forming. By morning, Tessa met Detective Avery Kane, former homicide detective turned cold case consultant. Early 50s, barrel-chested, gray flecks in hair, voice like worn leather. His office smelled of old paper and coffee, walls lined with corkboards, pins and timelines. "I've seen that tattoo before," Avery said, pointing to Tessa's sketch. "Case in 17. Drifter pulled from the river. Same triangle in circle, gloves too. Went by Prince." Tessa leaned in. "Think it's a group?" "Maybe," Avery admitted. "Could be organized, ritualistic. Careful. Trucks untraceable. Witnesses. They don't last long." Her phone buzzed. "Raoul Mercer. Need you at Oak Ridge Motel. Scene just broke. Ex-employee Harmony Outreach. Suicide," he said. She opened it carefully. A surveillance DVR, hardwired and advanced, far beyond what you'd expect in a community center. "Did you know about this?" she asked Claire. "No," the woman stammered, pale. "I swear, I've never seen it before." Tessa studied her, sincere, shaken, probably telling the truth. "Who else has access?" Claire hesitated. Mr. Hale, maybe Mr. Dean. He was the IT volunteer for a while. The name landed like a stone in Tessa's chest. She stepped back into the hallway, voice steady, sharp. Is there a child named Mia Patterson on your registry? Claire blinked. She was here last summer. Stopped coming after July session. Why? Tessa's jaw tightened. They found her contact file in the office, but the phone number was disconnected, the address incomplete, as though the trail had been deliberately erased. The quiet building, the locked rooms, the hidden surveillance. It all pointed to something far darker than the carefully painted walls suggested. Shadow stood at her side, ears pricked, nose sniffing the air, alert to every shadow, every whisper of movement. Whatever secrets lay ahead, they were far from over. Shadow had slipped silently into the coat closet, his nose tracing the air until he stopped by a single hook. A guttural bark escaped him, sharp and urgent. Tessa stepped closer, eyes scanning the small jacket hanging there, child-sized, name tag reading Mia P. The dog's low growl rumbled again, steady, mournful. He remembered. He knew the scent. Tessa knelt, meeting his gaze. You've smelled this before, haven't you? Was she with Eli's kidnapper? Shadow didn't blink. His confirmation was in the mournful vibration of his growl, quiet but absolute. The weight of it pressed down on Tessa's chest. Harmony, outreach, tutoring centers, they weren't safe havens. They were lures, traps targeting the overlooked, the vulnerable, operating in plain sight. Harmony Outreach was a registered nonprofit, visible at local events and bulletin boards, always framed by smiling children and a polished, well-meaning face. Nathan Hale. Early 40s, salt and pepper hair, clear blue eyes, voice smooth and persuasive. At town meetings, he spoke with conviction, flanked by kids who looked timid beside his charisma. Nobody had ever questioned his intentions until now. 2 hours later, Tessa parked outside the old brick church converted into the Harmony Outreach Community Building. Mist clung to the streets, the painted mural of children beneath a golden sun fading in the gray light. Shadow followed her inside. The reception area was quiet, too quiet. A young woman at the desk looked up, round glasses sliding down her nose, hands fluttering nervously. Hi, Officer Boyd. Can I help you? Tessa nodded, voice calm but firm. I'm following up regarding one of your former students, Eli Morgan. I'd like to speak with Mr. Hale. Claire Riggs, the receptionist, paled slightly. Mr. Hale? He's out of town, leadership summit. Left yesterday. Convenient, Tessa muttered. Mind if I look around? Claire hesitated. I'm not sure. Shadow growled low, alerting Tessa. His body angled toward a hallway to the left. She followed without hesitation, the polished classrooms and play areas now feeling staged. Too perfect, too curated. Shadow stopped abruptly outside a supply room, nose pressed to the floor. He scratched at the door once, deliberately. Tessa tried the knob. Locked. She turned to Claire. Got a key. Claire's fingers trembled as she fumbled through a drawer, producing a ring of keys. Tessa slid the correct one into the lock, pushing the door open. Inside, the room was modest, lined with shelves and cubbies. But behind one row, a drywall panel sat slightly off. Shadow scratched again. Tessa pressed, and the panel clicked inward, revealing a narrow crawl space. A black plastic case waited inside. But the dog stayed still, eyes locked on the dark tree-line above, body rigid, as if he knew the night had only given up one secret, and others were still waiting in the shadows. The moment Eli was lifted from the ravine and carried into the ambulance, Shadow followed without a sound, tail low, eyes fixed ahead. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and coffee, an odd mix of urgency and fatigue that pressed against the senses. Tessa lingered just outside the pediatric wing, arms crossed, watching the boy through the glass. He looked smaller here, fragile in a way the forest hadn't revealed, wrapped in blankets. His thin wrist taped to an four-line feeding fluids into his arm. Shadow lay curled at the foot of the bed, ears twitching at every sound, vigilant even in rest. She hadn't left the hospital for 10 hours. Sleep had fled hours ago. Her mind kept returning to the note tucked in Eli's soaked backpack. The warning scrawled for anyone who might find him. Mr. Dean. The learning house. The tutoring center that had always seemed harmless, modest, even praised for giving underprivileged kids a place to grow. Yet somehow it was tied to a 10-year-old boy nearly lost in the woods. A nurse approached, small and composed, with olive-toned skin and a gentle voice. He's stable now. You can go in, but he hasn't woken yet. Tessa nodded, voice low. Shadow lifted his head as she entered the room, eyes following her movements without losing calm. She crouched, brushing her fingers over his damp fur. You knew, she whispered. You knew where to find him. Shadow exhaled softly, a quiet acknowledgement, and lowered his head again. Her gaze landed on a folded flyer taped inside Eli's backpack. Harmony Outreach. Building safe spaces for future generations. The logo matched the sunburst emblem on the keychain. Tessa straightened, recognition settling in. A place she'd passed every day. A tidy tutoring center where staff smiled politely from the windows. Nothing about it had ever felt out of place. Until now, this boy hadn't scribbled a random message. He'd left a warning, a breadcrumb for whoever might find him, proof that he knew something was wrong, that someone was after him. Shadow shifted against Eli, his ears twitching at every sound, body pressed close like a shield. Tessa laid her hand gently on his back. You found him, she whispered. You brought us here. Static crackled faint from above, Raoul's voice breaking through. Med-evac inbound. ETA 12 minutes. Relief surged through her chest, though it tangled with dread. Eli stirred faintly, fingers twitching, a shallow breath escaping him. Shadow immediately licked his cheek, then lowered his head across the boy's chest, ears pricked to every beat of his fragile heart. Tessa tightened her grip around Eli's small hand, eyes scanning the ridgeline above. Something was wrong. The way he'd buried himself beneath the overhang, the fear etched in the desperate pencil strokes of that note. He hadn't stumbled here. He'd been running, hiding from someone who was still out there. The distant thrum of rotor blades bled through the canopy, building into a roar. Tessa scrambled up the slope, waving her jacket high until the helicopter swept overhead. A rescue team descended swiftly, ropes biting into the mud. At their head was Carla, a paramedic with calm eyes and practiced hands, her movements crisp as she knelt by the boy. He's hypothermic, she said, but he's alive. We'll warm him, fluids, then straight to County General. When one of the EMTs reached for Eli too quickly, Shadow growled, his teeth flashing in warning. Carla raised a steadying hand. Easy. Slow. The team adjusted, gentler this time, lifting him with care. Tessa pressed a hand to Shadow's back, voice low and certain. He's going to be okay. You did it. Shadow barked sharply, then leapt down the slope with a speed that defied the wounds in his paw. He pressed to the boy's side, nose searching his face, curling protectively against him as though to will warmth back into his still frame. Raoul's voice cut from above, sharp and urgent. He breathing. Tessa was already moving. The descent was brutal. Her boots slipped on wet stone, sending her sliding the last few feet until she hit hard against the ground. Pain shot up her ribs, but she ignored it, scrambling to the boy's side. Her fingers found his neck. There. A pulse. Weak, but there. She brushed dirt from his face, freckles showing faint beneath the grime. 10 years old. Too small. Too still. Hey, buddy, she whispered, her throat tightening. We've got you now. You're safe. Eli didn't respond. Shadow let out a low, trembling whine, nudging the boy's shoulder with his nose. His breath was shallow, ragged, his skin cold beneath Tessa's touch. Raoul called down, voice strained. No radio down there. I'll climb back, try to raise the medics. Stay with him. Tessa nodded, though her eyes never left the boy. Something about the scene gnawed at her. He hadn't just fallen. The ravine wasn't random. The overhang of stone and roots above him had been dragged with brush, forming a rough barrier, like he'd been hiding. She reached under, fingers closing on a torn backpack. It was soaked through, one strap ripped. Inside, nothing useful. Crumbled granola, a flashlight drained of batteries, until her hand brushed paper. A single page, edges warped with water, words scrawled in shaky pencil. His name's Mr. Dean. He said he knew my mom. I saw him at the learning house last week. I didn't like how he looked at the others. Please tell someone if I don't come back. The note blurred in her grip as she read it again, heart thudding. The learning house. The air cooled, carrying a damp chill that raised gooseflesh on her arms. Shadow slowed, his pace measured, then came to a halt at a fork in the path. He sniffed one way, then the other. His hackles lifted. Raoul's light cut across the trees. What is it? Tessa scanned the right-hand trail. There, on the bark of a cedar, a fresh scuff where something had scraped past fast and hard. Her voice dropped. This way. Shadow bolted forward, down the right-hand path. Neither of them hesitated. The canopy above remained unbroken, but the world around them began to pale. Not sunlight, not yet, just the faint bleeding of silver into the dark, a promise that the night was finally thinning. The forest had fallen into a silence so heavy it pressed against their ears. No birds, no rustle of leaves, not even the whisper of wind. Only the steady rhythm of boots on damp soil, breath pulling tight through lungs, and the relentless determination of Shadow leading them deeper. His nose traced invisible lines across the ground, tail rigid, body taut like a compass that would not sway. Raoul cracked another sunflower seed between his teeth, spitting the shell into the brush. Relentless, he muttered. Gotta give him that. Tessa didn't answer. Her world had narrowed to the shepherd's movements, the twitch of an ear, the pause of his step, the moments he stopped to taste the air. He wasn't wandering. He was reading the forest, pulling a story from the dirt and leaves that only he could see. The trail steepened, jagged rocks jutting upward like the bones of something ancient. They climbed, Shadow moving first, still strong despite his limp. At the crest, the ground dropped away, revealing a ravine below, 15 feet deep, its floor carpeted in mud and pine needles. Tessa raised her binoculars, scanning. Her heart lurched. At the base, twisted against the stone wall, lay a small body. Her voice cracked into a whisper. Eli. Barefoot, Tessa murmured, crouching low. He lost his shoes. Raoul's jaw tightened. If he was running, he's hurt. He won't last long like that. Shadow's growl rumbled low, sharp, drawing them toward a fallen log. Tessa pushed aside wet ferns, and there in the mud she spotted something glinting faintly under grime. Keychain. Plastic. Shaped like a heart, carved with an odd emblem. A sunburst bound inside 2 rings. Raoul stiffened. That's from the Clear Path Foundation. They ran a youth camp a couple years back. Got shut down after complaints. Psychological abuse, coercion. His voice flattened. Ugly stuff. Tessa turned the charm in her hand, her mind racing. Why would Eli have this? Raoul didn't answer. The question hung heavy in the damp air. Shadow's whine cut through the silence, soft at first, then insistent. He circled near a cluster of ferns, tail rigid, nose pressed to the ground. Tessa moved quickly, pulling back the brush. Her breath caught. A smear of dried blood, faint but undeniable. Just beyond it, drag marks etched into the mud, clawing up the slope. Her voice cracked into the stillness. He's hurt. He tried to keep moving. Shadow pressed forward, climbing the slope without pause. They followed, slipping on wet rock, pulling themselves up by roots and jagged stone. At one point, Tessa's foot slid out, sending her sideways, but Raoul's hand caught her wrist, steadying her. You good? He asked. She nodded, shaking him off gently. Keep going. At the top, the forest opened into a narrow game trail. The signs were everywhere now. A broken shoelace caught in a bramble. A flashlight dented and half-buried. A single child's sock soaked and filthy. He's leaving us a trail, Raoul muttered. Not on purpose, Tessa said softly. He's breaking down. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The trees loomed higher, their trunks thick and twisted, roots rising like bones through the soil. Raoul had once worn the uniform of the Idaho State Troopers, until a traffic stop ended in gunfire and cost him his partner. Since then, he trusted procedure more than people, and even that trust was thin. He spat a sunflower seed into the mud and eyed the dog. "So this is your guide?" Tessa didn't answer. She crouched beside the shepherd, brushing her fingers lightly against his damp fur. He didn't so much as glance at her. His eyes were locked on the dark mouth of the forest, body quivering with restless urgency. "Hell of a dog," Raoul muttered. "What's his name?" "Shadow," she said quietly. "He brought Eli's backpack to the station. He wants us to follow." Raoul gave a short, doubtful grunt. But he didn't argue. He'd seen stranger things than a dog leading the way. The woods swallowed them quickly. Flashlights stayed dark to preserve their sight. The canopy pressed down above, thick with Douglas fir and cedar, damp air dripping with rain. The world narrowed to soft earth, slick pine needles, the sound of boots and paws moving forward. No radio, no signal, only silence, broken by the whisper of branches in the wind. Shadow moved with intent, nose brushing the ground, stopping now and then to test the air. 20 minutes in, he froze. His ears twitched. His muzzle lifted toward a low branch. Then he turned and fixed his amber gaze on Tessa. She raised her light and saw it. A scrap of blue nylon, torn and clinging to bark. She reached for it, fingers brushing the damp fabric. "It's from his jacket," she whispered. Raoul nodded grimly. Could have snagged it running through. Shadow veered suddenly off the trail, down a steep embankment slick with mud. They slid after him, boots skidding until the forest opened into a narrow gully lined with moss-slick rocks. That's where she saw it, half buried in the wet earth. The footprint. Small. Bare. The toes splayed as if whoever left it had been running. Her throat tightened. Eli had been missing for a full day. He'd vanished on the walk home from school, and every search party had returned empty-handed. They'd scoured the woods, sent up helicopters, combed the creek beds. Nothing. Until now. Harrelson swore under his breath, shaking his head. "Well, I'll be damned." But Tessa was already standing, her voice steady, sharp. "Wake the sheriff. Get a team ready." "You're not serious," Harrelson muttered. "Following a dog?" Her eyes locked on the shepherd, whose body had shifted once more toward the door, waiting, every muscle taut with direction. She didn't hesitate. "This isn't just a dog. Look at him. He knows exactly where he's going." Something old and half-buried stirred inside her chest. That certainty she hadn't felt in over a year. The unshakable pull of instinct, louder than doubt, stronger than fear. She grabbed her jacket, heart hammering. "I'm going with him." The storm had softened by the time she pulled her cruiser onto the gravel road that led north into the woods. But the darkness there felt deeper, the kind that swallowed light whole. The German shepherd limped ahead, glancing back just once, as though making sure she was close enough to follow. And she was, because something told her that every second now mattered. Dawn was still holding its breath, the sky caught between night and morning, smeared in shades of gray. The cruiser's headlights carved a pale beam through the mist, and there he was, waiting at the edge of the treeline. Shadow. His body tense, ears forward. A silent sentinel exactly where she'd last seen him. Tessa stepped out, her boots sinking into the wet earth. The air smelled of rain and pine. Beside her, Deputy Raoul Mercer followed, tall and lean, his stubble shadowing a face that had forgotten what rest felt like. He carried with him the weary calm of a man who had already seen too many endings. Across the room, Officer Tessa Boyd worked in silence, her eyes locked on a case file. She was new to Cedar Hollow, just 2 weeks in, and the youngest officer on the force. At 27, with her sharp cheekbones and chestnut hair tied back in a braid, she didn't look the part, at least not to the locals. More than once she'd overheard the whispers. "City girl, probably can't even start a chainsaw." What they didn't know was that Tessa had transferred here after losing a child abduction case in Seattle, a case she had followed by the book, every procedure, every step, and still the kid never came home. Since then, rules felt brittle to her, but instinct that sharpened with a kind of raw, painful clarity. The doors slammed open. Wind tore through the station like a scream, rattling the windows. Both officers leapt to their feet. From the storm staggered the shepherd, massive even through his soaked and matted fur. His coat, once black and silver, was caked in mud, his left ear scarred, his body quivering with exhaustion. But his eyes burned with an urgency that commanded the room. He stood in the center, chest heaving, and dropped the backpack onto the tile. "What the hell?" Harrelson muttered, stepping forward. But before he could approach, the dog snarled low, a growl that rumbled deep from his chest. Even injured, he was ready to defend what he carried. Tessa lifted her hand. "Wait!" She lowered herself slowly, palms open, speaking with her body more than her voice. The shepherd didn't wag his tail, didn't soften. His ears stayed pinned, his body tense. But his gaze flicked, first to her, then to the pack, then to the door and back again. A signal. A plea. Her fingers brushed the wet nylon, turning it over. A name tag smeared with mud came into focus. Eli Morgan. Grade 4. Cedar Hollow Elementary. Just before dawn, when the world was still half asleep and shadows clung to every corner, the doors of the Cedar Hollow police station were forced open. Not by hands, but by destiny itself. Out of the storm stepped a German shepherd, drenched in rain. His fur tangled with mud, one paw dragging as he limped across the floor. In his mouth hung a child's backpack, soaked, heavy, and silent. His eyes carried a message too urgent for words. "Follow me." He wasn't searching for food. He wasn't begging for shelter. He came with purpose, with a mission burning through the pain of every step. The officers in the room froze as the dog released the pack with a dull, wet thud, then turned back toward the door, trembling but unyielding, as though somewhere out there, beyond the storm, beyond the trees, something waited that only he could lead them to. This was not just an animal stumbling in from the rain. This was instinct made flesh, memory made loyal, a bond forged in something far deeper than survival. The night had been merciless. By 3 in the morning, the skies over Cedar Hollow were black as spilled oil, the kind of storm that made even the mountains seem to vanish. Rain battered rooftops and needled down the streets, filling the gutters until the whole town seemed to drown beneath it. Thunder rolled far off like a drumbeat, slow and deliberate, promising it would soon be overhead. Inside the station, the hours dragged like lead. Deputy Mike Harrelson sat at the front desk, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, his belly rounded from years of black coffee and powdered donuts. His voice, when he used it, was low and rough, like gravel washed in whiskey. But tonight he barely spoke, keeping himself awake by reading the same stack of reports over and over again.